I think after a while you realise if you have that unhealthy political culture in your own party, you export that unhealthy political culture into the wider politics when you govern.
Do you think Morgan McSweeney is the dangerous force in the Labour Party?
He is clearly one of them. Hello, my name is Lloyd Russell-Moyle, and I, for 7 years, was the Member of Parliament for Brighton Kemptown and Peacehaven. And today I'm joined the Green Party, and I've joined the Green Party hopefully to be involved in a really exciting movement that is aiming to change Britain, to make hope normal again, and to really improve the lives of ordinary people in this country.
That's really interesting. I'm going to come back to that hope point shortly, but let's start with the Greens. What is it specifically about the party that has attracted you to it? Is it the leadership of Zack Polanski? Has there been a change in the Green Party that you've seen, or is it the policies that they have? What is it?
Well, I've always worked collaboratively with the Green Party. When I stood in 2017, the Green Party stood down and hundreds of their activists were outdoor knocking for me day in, day out. I've always believed in coalitions and progressive alliances where we need them and where we can have them. So it's not like I'm joining a party that I don't know. I feel like I know them. But what we see with the leadership of Zack is a clear articulation of how we make those messages popular. He talks about it, kind of eco-populism and things like this. And I think that's so important. For me, the two key things of a decent political party is that you are populist, i.e. you understand the needs and wants and desires of ordinary people, and you translate difficult and complex situations into simple messages that they can be inspired by. And secondly, it is to be broad-based, not to be a particular ideological sect, but to have a broad base of views that you accept and you are willing to work with, and you are willing to listen to different views within your party. And to me, the Green Party at the moment is not only the only game in town, it's an exemplar in those two things.
I think I appreciate the comment about the broad base, but I think one of the sort of the sticklers of that will be their policies on wealth tax and their policies on immigration. So can I just start with the wealth tax? Is that something that you would support? And is that something that you're disappointed that perhaps the Labour Party hasn't invested in?
I've always supported a form of wealth tax. We have a very poor form of wealth tax in council tax, basically, in property at the moment, but it's completely broken and doesn't work for anyone. And there was an opportunity when this new government came in to really rethink that, and they have completely dropped the ball on it. And so the idea of a wealth tax, where we say the hoarding of money is not an acceptable thing in a modern society. You might remember that Emma Barnett on Radio 5 during the 2019 election scolded me for saying that I didn't think billionaires should exist in this country. And I think it was the day of the election launch, and I got lots of ticking off diverting from the official Labour Party message, but I still stand by that. I don't think that we should be having people in this country that are hoarding wealth from others and are not sharing it and are not using it for social good. And that's what wealth tax encourages, that's what wealth tax pushes for, a country that uses its resources for everyone to benefit and everyone to rise rather than a few.
Looking at the recent announcement this week from Labour on new immigration rules, particularly around bringing in this Danish system, you're going to have refugees who are on 20 years, visas before they're allowed to have settled status. Is that a push factor for you away from the Labour Party? And do you think that's something that you could change by being within the Greens?
Well, it definitely is one of those final straws. The idea that in that announcement that they said that they would look at taking jewellery and personal effects off refugees as they came over on that crossing. Now, no one wants people on that crossing, but to snatch people's jewellery is just, I think, one of the most revolting things that you can suggest. Why would you do that? That is not a deterrent. That is just cruelty. That is just nastiness. And it's something that even the Conservatives in their very worst days would have never contemplated. The idea that we're going to remove ourselves from sections of the human rights regulations and regime because we want to be able to ensure people don't have the right to a family life is just abhorrent to how you think children could be engaged with being deported. the idea that the government hasn't been able to discuss whether they would tear families apart or not in this plan. I think all of it is absolutely unpleasant. But the worst part of it is that I don't think it will deter a single person. It will stop people integrating because they won't be here permanently. It will stop people accessing services because they won't be eligible for many services. But what it will not do is stop people coming over here who are desperate and who are keen. The only way we stop people coming to the UK is to have a proper, fair and legal routes to apply for asylum outside of the UK. Something that is still impossible, something that NGOs and campaigners have been asking for time and time again, something that even the mayor of Calais has said that they would be willing to think about now, proper processing centres in France, in other places around the world. And actually, if you are going to say we should follow the most miserable processes of asylum around the world, like the Australian model, that actually worked because they had proper, fair and legal routes in other countries that people could apply for. What we're doing is closing our border, denigrating asylum seekers and refugees, and also not providing fair, legal routes to this country. It is just wrong and abhorrent. And the reason that refugee convention was introduced in this country was nothing to do with how other people were treating refugees and asylum seekers. The reason we introduced that refugee convention was because we were so embarrassed in this country that we had turned away Jews fleeing the Nazis. And the idea now that we forget that historical message and turn our back on some of the conventions that we had helped build makes me definitely wonder about the compassion in this country and in the Labour Party. But then the only party I see turning that around, the only party that I see speaking out against it, the only party that is calling this as it is morally wrong, to me seems to be the Green Party, under the leadership of Zack, but actually under the support of hundreds of thousands of new members that have joined because they also see that what this government is doing is wrong.
Can I talk to you a little bit about housing? I mean, around Brighton, there is a huge issue with housing. I spoke to a student who's actually living on this very campus that we're on. She's paying £200 a week to live here. And, there's an argument here that it's because there simply isn't enough proper housing in Brighton in order for them to move out. What would you want to see the Green Party do on housing? What would attract you, or what has attracted you on those policies?
Well, a real understanding that it is not just a policy of build, baby, build, which is what some people are pushing forward, but it's a policy of the right kind of tenure in the right kind of place that has local community buy-in. It is making sure that we have decent council housing. It is making sure that we have rent regulation. It is making sure that we have rights for renters. And those are the kinds of policies that the Green Party are putting forward. And those are the kinds of policies, in my view, that will make a difference to the ordinary renter in this country. I sat on the Renters' Rights Bill where in the last Parliament when we were trying to bring it through, and I constantly tried to put forward amendments for proper rental regulation. I constantly tried to put forward amendments for even possibly the right to buy in the rented sector, i.e. if you had rented a house for a long time, why couldn't you buy it from the landlord? And they were always rejected, not by the Conservatives, but it was Labour that was saying, no, you can't push that, Lloyd. That's too far, that's too radical. And actually the Green Party, I think, are willing to listen to those ideas that would actually alleviate the real crisis that we have in housing in this country.
Do you have a little bit of reticence then, if you have been pushed back on before with more radical reforms? If you look at Adrian Ramsey, for example, who was the former co-leader of the Green Party, he had turned down an application or fought against an application for pylons for renewable energy in his constituency. You've also got Rachel Millward, actually around here in Sussex, who has just declined accommodation for 600 asylum seekers. Does that worry you? Is there a sense of NIMBYism perhaps in the Green Party that you're going to have to work on?
Well, look, the role of democracy in this country is that you represent your local area first and your ideology second, okay? I mean, the Labour MP for Calderdale in West Yorkshire is opposing a wind farm expansion up there, even though the government is backing it. That is quite right. It is quite right that local representatives, whatever party they are from, Green, Labour, wherever, that they represent their local people first. And the problem with a lot of the build, baby, build rhetoric is it's top-down, heavy-handed. What we actually need is proper community solutions where you bring communities together. And my view, personally, is that I am less sympathetic to people that complain about pylons, because I think that ordinary working people have had factories and unpleasant roads built next to their houses for generations, and now it's being built, a pylon's being put next to a middle-class house, they're all up in arms. I have less sympathy for that. But it is quite right in a broad-based party that a member of parliament or an elected representative can reflect that maybe there is a better way of doing this that could bring all people together. And in fact, one of the worst things you can do in politics is to ignore what people are saying on the ground and to say, no, we know right how to do this. We're just going to push forward on it. And that's why I'm pleased about that change in the Green Party, actually, that it is about listening to people, that populism that Zack talks about. That means that you have to listen to people's real concerns. And that might be a camp being set up without the right infrastructure. And the question should not be, how do we not have that? The question should be, how do we provide the right resources and infrastructure to get the community on board? When I went and visited the Bibi Stockholm, which was the refugee barge down in Portland, a lot of the local residents were telling me they weren't actually opposed to having a barge there. What they were opposed to is there being no community benefit. Their local hospital had recently shut down, and the government was paying for private doctors to go into the barge. Why on earth wasn't there a win-win situation there where we reopened the hospital, we're using some of the money that needed for healthcare for the refugees and some of the support for the local community? You can have win-win solutions, and it's quite right that people oppose heavy-handed top-down solutions when they are not going to work.
Yeah, there's the sort of zero-sum game, isn't it?
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. And you see that all over the place. So I have no problem with individuals raising these concerns.
Well, this is a good segue actually into Labour, Ben. Do you think there's been a sense over the past year and a bit while Labour have been in government that they haven't been listening to local voters, to local constituency MPs? Is there a sense that perhaps they are ploughing on with legislation that doesn't match what the mandate was?
I'm afraid they haven't been listening to anyone. And how they treat their own party members, I mean, my treatment was egregious, but only 2 months ago, the local secretary of my Labour branch was kicked out for attending a trans rights protest. Last week, the local media officer in Brighton was kicked out of the Labour Party because he wrote an obituary for an old socialist that wasn't approved by the Labour Party. It is authoritarian. It's rather nasty. And you now see those kinds of attitudes in government from this party. You see where decent citizens want to raise their voice around a genocide in Palestine, rather than the government confronting the issue, rather than the government actually saying that they would take action like the Spanish government has done. Instead, they make supporting Palestine action a terrorist crime. Absolutely disproportionate, absolutely disgraceful, but absolutely authoritarian. And it's what they have been doing, and they continue to do. And you see that with other areas where people, the disability changes, for example, stopped, not completely, but in a large part because of a backbench rebellion. But then the punishment of Labour people who supported that rebellion and who said it was wrong, it's not a listening government. And the people around, I'm afraid, are not pleasant people. Now, that shouldn't determine the final bit of politics. The final bit of politics should be on policy, not on personality. But if you have people that are personally horrible, that, I'm afraid, outlines into their politics, and their politics is one of unpleasantness.
Well, I think let's talk a little bit about your deselection just before the election, because it did come as a surprise. It was the precipitator to Faiza Shaheen's deselection. In your constituency, Chris Ward was awarded that selection, awarded the ballot, and he is a former Keir Starmer staffer. Can we delve into a little bit, because I think there will be some questions. What was the reason that was given to you? I know that the investigation is now over, but I'd like to hear your perspective. What was the reason that was given to you of why you could not appear on the ballot at that time?
At the time, they said a complaint had been received, and they gave 3 vague statements on what that complaint was about, all before I was an MP. And I wouldn't tell me who had made it, but it was clear from the 3 allegations that it was a complaint that had already been submitted to the Labour Party a number of years prior and already been looked at and been considered to be either vexatious or non-serious. And the party said these were serious matters. And if you look at them, they weren't. And I said that to the party at the time, and I said, well, can I at least put my case? No, the decision's been made. You can't even put your case. You can't even write a letter for us to consider the alternative argument here. We've decided you're not going to be on the ballot paper. All you need to decide, they said, was how you want to resign. That was all the choice. And I pushed back and I said, well, I want to at least put my case that some of this is just untrue. And I was given 12 hours to respond afterwards, and they said, but the words they used, but it's a Hail Mary, Lloyd, don't expect anything to change. And so I put the case together, and including, during that 12 hours, I found out that the party had twice written to this complainant saying, are you sure you don't want to resubmit the complaint? So they had courted this complaint. Now, I'm sure the party will give explanation. Oh, well, we just wanted to make sure everything was clear off the books, etc., etc. But we know, from my perspective, they had received the complaint many years before. They had looked at the complaint and they had dismissed it. And then I see this, and I have a copy of the letter from the party to the individual saying, are you sure, sir, that you don't want to resubmit this case? And I don't know why the decision was done to resubmit it, but clearly the person did. A few months later pass, I'm off the ballot paper, I hear nothing from the party, and then I get a letter from the party saying, you've spoken too much about why you were deselected, we're going to start another disciplinary against you. And I said, well, hang on a second, Keir Starmer's office said that I had to make a statement. They said, you've got to decide the terms you resign. Oh yes, but the rules say you need to have confirmation from the General Secretary to speak about anything, and you didn't get it. You only got confirmation from the leader. So they then gave me a written warning of my conduct. So it's all Kafkaesque. It's all one side tells you to say something, then they get you for doing that. And then in December last year, almost a year ago now, they wrote to me saying, we wrote to the individual asking for more evidence. The individual at that point has withdrawn their complaint against you, and we have no evidence to pursue, so therefore you're back in to the party. Let's forget it's all happened.
But you're not a Labour MP.
No.
And you missed the election.
Exactly.
Can I ask you, what do you think the underlying reason was that? Like, not to potentially conspiracy theory here, but there was a suggestion at one point in time that people who were perhaps more left-leaning were being asked to leave the party. The sort of the Morgan McSweeney campaign directorship meant that a number of quote-unquote socialists were not wanted on the ballot. Do you think you fell into that category? Well,
I was chair for many years of the Socialist Campaign Group in Parliament. I don't hold orthodox socialist views, my hetero-orthodox socialist views. I believe in the collective of ideas, and I believe sometimes you need to take strands from different things. I believe very much in cooperation and cooperatives, which often can, in the Labour Party terms, be more of a centrist view. So I do have multiple different, because I think you can learn from all different views and ideologies, but I am a socialist. And it was clear, wasn't it, that there was a hostility to socialists in the Labour Party, even though they say that they're a democratic socialist party. Now, I don't know whether there was a conspiracy or a list that they went down, but I do know that all of us in that Socialist Campaign Group, from John McDonnell to Olivia Blake, all of us had talked about the fact that we were worried that they were trying to trip us up at any moment and would try and get us off the ballot paper. And we all talked about it in those terms that they could come for any of us at any moment, and there's nothing that we could really do about it, and we just had to try and hope that we scraped through. Most did. I wasn't able to. But it is not a very healthy political culture. You don't get MPs that then are willing to speak out and do the right thing if they're constantly fearful that the party is going to stab them in the back. And I think after a while you realise if you have that unhealthy political culture in your own party, you export that unhealthy political culture into the wider politics when you govern.
Do you think Morgan McSweeney is the dangerous force in the Labour Party?
He is clearly one of them.
On a lighter note, Green Party, if you've got one policy that you would like to bring to the table to talk to members about, now obviously I would never suggest that you have to implement it tomorrow because that is not the nature of the Green Party, as you said, what would you want to bring to the table to discuss?
I would like us to get serious with a plan that Caroline Lucas and I had hatched when we were both MPs, which is a plan to go street by street, house by house, and offer full insulation, full heat replacement for boilers, and we do it in a coordinated national way that means people pay not one penny. It doesn't matter how rich or poor you are, but because we say this is part of a national endeavour, and it is maybe something that you will pay over time in energy bills, etc., but we need to do every house. It can't be just the free market, and it needs to be coordinated, just like we did when we changed from town gas to natural gas. We paid for individuals to come into every house, because every gas boiler and every cooker had to be changed during that changeover. We didn't say to people, oh, when you're changing, we'll give you a little grant. We organised it. That's the kind of level that we need to take those kinds of social actions. And of course, it helps with mould and damp and the disease that we see in our housing up and down this country at the moment. And it fulfills those climate objectives. And to me, I would love the Greens to be pushing to make that reality. And I don't think that they would be objectionable to that whatsoever.
Eco-populist, I would say, in nature that.
Maybe.
Lloyd Russell-Moyle, thank you very much.